Eric Daniel Davila, April 25, 2018. On April 6, 2008, a Sunday evening, Annette Stevenson hosted a birthday party at her home in Fort Worth. Around 15 children and several adults were gathered there, enjoying cake and ice cream on the front porch when, around 8 p.m., a black Mazda crept past the house. Inside was a man aiming a gun fitted with a red laser sight. The car stopped a couple of blocks away. The gunman, 21-year-old Eric Davila, got out with the weapon and knocked on the door of a nearby house. When no one answered, he walked through a passage between the houses and positioned himself in a field directly across from the Stevensons' home. Meanwhile, his accomplice, Garfield Thompson, slid into the driver's seat of the Mazda and drove off. Davila crouched near an air conditioning unit, aimed towards the house, and opened fire. After several rounds, he ran into the street, stood in plain view, and continued shooting before jumping back into the Mazda as it returned to pick him up. Police arrived to a horrific scene. Annette Stevenson, 47, lay dead in a back bedroom. 5-year-old Kashawn was fatally shot while sitting on the living room couch. 2 more children, including the 9-year-old birthday girl, suffered gunshot wounds to their legs, and the house was spattered with blood. Investigators collected shell casings both from the street and from the field. Several witnesses saw the attack. Kent Reed, who was barbecuing at a nearby birthday party, reported seeing Davila step out of the Mazda with the rifle, knock on the vacant house's door, and then fire 2 bursts of shots. He described the car and noted the gunman's distinctive silver ear bolts. The following day, Reed picked Davila out of a photo lineup. A 15-year-old boy at the Stevenson party also followed the gunman and saw him stop near the air conditioner, aiming the laser sight at Jerry Big Boy Dooney Stevenson, Annette's adult son and the only grown man at the party. When Jerry went inside, the beam moved to the house windows and then to Annette as she tried to usher the children indoors. The shooter opened fire, seemingly frustrated at failing to hit Jerry. Another key witness, Nicole Blackwell, came forward after realizing her own car may have been used in the murders. She told police that she and Davila lived together. He bore a Truman Street's blood tattoo on his chest and owned a black rifle. On the day of the shootings, he left in her black Mazda around 3 p.m. and returned multiple times late that night. Detective Brent Johnson arrested Davila on April 8. Over 7 hours, he gave 4 written statements. In the third, he admitted to deciding with Thompson to stage what he called a shoot-'em-up in his neighborhood. He retrieved a magazine for his rifle from Miss Sheila's house, described as a stash spot for guns and drugs, and loaded it before returning to the scene. According to his confession, Davila claimed his targets were Jerry Stevenson and several men on the porch. "I only let off 10 rounds out of the 21 in the clip. I was trying to get the fat dude and the guys on the porch. I wasn't aiming at the kids or the woman. I don't know where the woman came from." The day after the murders, Davila handed his SKS semi-automatic rifle to a fellow Bloods member who later surrendered it to police. The weapon had a folding stock, infrared scope, and a bayonet attached. At trial, Jerry Stevenson testified that ongoing gang violence between the Bloods and Crips had plagued the neighborhood. Just a week earlier, he had intervened in a confrontation outside his mother's house, possibly marking it as a Crip house in the eyes of Bloods members. Davila's defense argued that his only intention was to kill Jerry Stevenson, not the children or Annette, and therefore the case should not qualify as capital murder. However, prosecutors introduced evidence from his fourth statement, where Davila admitted to committing a robbery and another murder just 2 days before the party shooting. His prior convictions included burglary, Mary Jane possession, and other crimes. In February 2009, a jury convicted Davila of capital murder, sentencing him to death. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals upheld the verdict in 2011, and all later appeals were rejected. His lawyers maintained that he never intended to kill anyone other than Jerry Stevenson and argued he was heavily intoxicated to the point of possible temporary insanity. On the day of his execution, Davila lifted his head from the gurney to acknowledge relatives of his victims who had entered the witness chamber. In his final words, unapologetic, he declared, "I may have lost the fight, but I'm still a soldier. Take it as it is. To my supporters and family, you'll hold it down. 10 toes down. That's all I gotta say." He was pronounced dead by lethal injection at 6:31 p.m. Juan Eduard Castillo, May 16, 2018. In the early hours of December 3, 2003, gunfire shattered the calm of a quiet San Antonio neighborhood. 26-year-old Debra Espinoza pounded on a nearby door for help. 19-year-old Tommy Garcia Jr. was found dead in the street. Police quickly arrested Francisco Gonzalez as he tried to flee. Espinoza herself was taken into custody shortly after. Both pointed the finger at 22-year-old Castillo, Espinoza's boyfriend and Gonzalez's friend, claiming he was the shooter. They agreed to testify against him. According to Espinoza and Gonzalez, the four of them, Castillo, Espinoza, Gonzalez, and Gonzalez's girlfriend Teresa Bita Quintero, hatched a plan that night to rob Garcia, with whom Espinoza had once been romantically involved. The scheme was simple. Espinoza would lure Garcia to a secluded area under the pretense of relations. While she pretended to be a victim, Castillo and Gonzalez would rob him, with Quintero acting as the getaway driver. They testified that once Garcia parked his car and began making out with Espinoza, Castillo and Gonzalez appeared in ski masks, both armed. Gonzalez later admitted his gun was broken and only for intimidation. Castillo smashed a car window with his weapon, ordered Garcia to hand over money, and when Garcia bolted, shot him multiple times. Two friends of Garcia, Frank Russell and Robert Jimenez, confirmed he had been with them earlier that evening before leaving to pick up Espinoza. Not long after, Espinoza called Jimenez in tears, claiming Garcia had been shot. When Russell and Jimenez rushed to the scene, they found Garcia's car doors open and his body lying face down in the street. Other witnesses tied Castillo to the crime. Gonzalez's sister, Lucinda, said Castillo and Espinoza visited her home that evening and borrowed her car, with Quintero driving. Hours later, Quintero returned the car. Days afterward, Lucinda overheard Quintero asking Castillo what would happen to Gonzalez, to which Castillo replied that Gonzalez would be fine because the shooter was Castillo. He admitted dumping the mask, gloves, and gun in a nearby field. Lucinda's 15-year-old nephew, Brian Brown, also testified that Castillo was armed and wearing a bulletproof vest that night before leaving with the group. Later, Castillo confided to him that he had shot someone and hidden the weapon and vest. Garcia, a local rap musician, was known for wearing a large gold medallion. Several witnesses testified they had seen him wearing it on the night of his death. The following day, Castillo was spotted wearing that same necklace. When confronted, he dismissed the observation, and later the medallion was no longer visible. While in jail, Castillo allegedly confessed to another inmate, Gerardo Gutierrez, that he, Frank, and Bita had planned a robbery that went wrong, ending in Garcia's death. Gutierrez later admitted he had fabricated parts of his testimony to help himself, though the courts determined other witnesses provided consistent accounts that supported Castillo's guilt. The defense maintained Castillo's innocence, pointing out that no physical evidence directly tied him to the murder. Still, his criminal past worked against him. In 2001, he had already been convicted of reckless firearm use, serving a year in prison. During his sentencing hearing, witnesses recounted that he had assaulted the mother of his child, committed armed robberies, and even fired a weapon in a road rage incident. In 2005, a jury convicted him of capital murder and sentenced him to death. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals upheld the decision in 2007. His three accomplices faced lesser charges. Espinoza pleaded guilty to aggravated robbery and received 40 years. Gonzalez pleaded guilty to murder and was sentenced to 40 years as well. Quintero, with a history of theft and burglary, pleaded no contest to robbery and was sentenced to 20 years, later released on parole in 2014. Castillo's execution was postponed multiple times between 2017 and 2018 due to procedural errors, natural disasters, and Gutierrez's recantation. However, the courts ultimately ruled that the recantation would not have changed the outcome of his trial, and a new execution date was set. In a final death row interview, Castillo denied killing Garcia, insisted the necklace was his own, and rejected Espinoza as his girlfriend. He claimed he had been offered plea deals but refused, saying, "I don't want to die, but I couldn't live with myself if I admitted to something I didn't do." On the evening of his execution, Garcia's mother and stepmother were present, though none of Castillo's family attended. Castillo's last words were brief: "To everyone that has been there for me, you know who you are. Love y'all. See y'all on the other side. That's it." He then muttered about the burning sensation of the lethal injection before being pronounced dead at 6:44 p.m. Danny Paul Bible, June 27, 2018. On Sunday, May 27, 1979, the body of 20-year-old Inez Deaton was discovered on a bayou slope in Houston. She had been stabbed 11 times, her head was covered in bruises, and her body bore clear signs of SA. Her pants were missing, her underwear was torn, and trauma to both her private area and the rest of the body indicated a violent attack. Neighbors later told police that only a few days earlier, Deaton had come by asking to use a phone. One woman suggested she tried the home of Robert Bible, who lived next door. Another witness confirmed seeing Deaton enter Bible's house. After that, she was never seen alive again. At the time, Bible was 27 years old. His sister was friends with Deaton, and shortly after her body was found, he disappeared. For nearly 20 years, the murder remained unsolved. Bible drifted to Wyoming and Montana, where he committed a string of violent crimes, including kidnapping, theft, and SA. Eventually, he returned to Texas. In 1984, he pleaded guilty to 2 separate crimes, the murder of Pam Hudgens in Palo Pinto County and an unrelated robbery. He was sentenced to 20 years for the murder and 25 for the robbery, but because Texas prisons were under strict population caps imposed by federal judge William Wayne Justice, violent offenders were frequently paroled. Bible was released in 1992. 6 years later, on November 7, 1998, Bible forced his way into a hotel room in Louisiana, where he essayed a woman named Tara Robinson. He was arrested in Florida and extradited back to Louisiana. The following month, he confessed not only to the attack but also admitted to killing Inez Deaton back in 1979. Texas investigators traveled to take his confession. In his statement, Bible explained that Deaton had come to his house and without hesitation, he grabbed her, forced her to have relations, strangled her, and stabbed her. He recalled putting her body in the trunk of a car and later dumping it. Investigators determined the weapon used was an ice pick, and Houston media began calling him the ice pick killer. Bible also confessed to a long trail of violence. He admitted that in 1983, he essayed his sister-in-law, Tracy Powers, then murdered her and her 4-month-old son, Justin. Powers had been roommates with Pam Hudgens, the woman Bible had already been convicted of killing, and he admitted he killed both women on the same day. He also admitted to essaying his 5 nieces between 1996 and 1998, while he was out on parole, as well as the essay of an 11-year-old girl in Montana. Altogether, he confessed to 4 murders and at least 9 essays. In June 2003, a jury found him guilty of Deaton's murder and sentenced him to death. 2 years later, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals upheld the conviction. That same year, while being transported to death row, Bible was severely injured in a van crash that killed both drivers. From then on, he required a wheelchair and had limited use of his arms. In his appeals, his attorneys argued that these disabilities made him incapable of posing a threat, but the courts rejected the claim. Later, his lawyers raised concerns about his Parkinson's disease, his tremors, and difficulty finding suitable veins for an IV, arguing that lethal injection would cause unnecessary suffering. They suggested alternatives such as a firing squad or nitrogen hypoxia, but Texas law only permits lethal injection. Attorney Nadia Wood argued to the U.S. Supreme Court that Bible's unique medical conditions made lethal injection an intolerably cruel method of execution, but the claim was denied. On the day of his execution, relatives of 2 of his victims observed from the witness room. Bible stared at them but refused to make a final statement. When the injection began, his head trembled slightly, but the procedure went forward without issues. As the drugs entered his system, Bible said that it hurt and was burning. Moments later, at 6:32 p.m., he was pronounced dead. Christopher Anthony Young, July 17, 2018. On the morning of Sunday, November 21, 2004, Daphne Edwards drove to a nearby mini-mart and dry cleaners in San Antonio, owned by Hasmukh Bhai Patel, to buy cigarettes. The store was only a block from her apartment, and she was gone for less than 5 minutes. When she returned, she found her 3 daughters, all under the age of 7, eating breakfast in the apartment. Almost immediately, someone knocked on her door. Thinking it was her sister, Edwards opened it, only to be confronted by a man pointing a silver revolver at her head. He pushed his way inside and demanded money. She gave him the $28 in her purse, but it wasn't enough. He instructed her to send the girls to another room, but the small efficiency apartment had no other room. He then forced Edwards to undress and have relations with him, even firing a shot at her feet when she hesitated. The attacker moved the assault to the bathroom, attempting to shield the children from view, and later forced Edwards to put on revealing clothing as they left. When she protested leaving her children behind, he said, "You did it before, I saw you." Disturbingly, he then kissed each of the children on the cheek and told them their mother would be back. The man made Edwards drive her red Mazda to the front of the apartment complex. Once there, he decided to take the wheel. Edwards saw people nearby and seized the moment. She jumped out of the car and ran screaming for her cousin's apartment. The man drove off in her car. Edwards and her cousin immediately called the police and went to retrieve her children. Around 9:30 a.m., Hattie Helton, a regular at Patel's store, bought scratch-off lottery tickets and sat in her car to check them. The store surveillance footage later showed a man in a black shirt and light-colored shorts enter the store at 9:37 a.m. He pointed a gun at Patel and demanded money. When Patel attempted to flee, the man fired shots and the store alarm sounded. Helton and another witness, Raul Vasquez Jr., saw the man leave the store and get into a red car. Vasquez tried to follow but lost him. Patel suffered a fatal gunshot to the chest. Police traced the red Mazda, matching part of its license plate, to a nearby crack house. Inside, they found 21-year-old Christopher Young with a prostitute. Gunshot residue on his hands, shirt, and the car's steering wheel, along with Patel's blood on his sock, linked him to the crime. Both Helton and Vasquez identified Young as the shooter at trial. The murder weapon was never recovered. Young's lawyers didn't deny he was the man in the surveillance footage, but argued that the short, partially out-of-frame video did not prove robbery or attempted robbery. Without those aggravating factors, the defense claimed the death penalty could not apply. The prosecution presented additional evidence of Young's violent history. His girlfriend testified that he beat her while she was 8 months pregnant and the night before Patel's murder. Records also showed he had assaulted his mother twice as a juvenile. In February 2006, a jury convicted Young of capital murder and sentenced him to death. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals affirmed the verdict in April 2009, and all subsequent appeals were denied. In interviews from death row, Young denied essaying Edwards and claimed he did not intend to rob or kill Patel, alleging the confrontation escalated. He said he joined the Bloods gang at age 8 after his father was killed in a robbery and credited his time on death row with helping him overcome anger, alcohol, and drug use. He believed it saved his life, saying without it, he likely would have ended up dead or in prison anyway. Leading up to his execution, some advocates, including Patel's adult son, petitioned for clemency, citing Young's transformation. A recent case where the Texas Parole Board commuted the sentence of another inmate after a victim's family appeal gave hope, but Young's clemency request was ultimately denied. His attorney filed a lawsuit claiming racial bias in the decision, but state and federal courts rejected it. In his final statement, Young addressed his victim's family and the children he had mentored. "Make sure the kids in the world know I'm being executed, and those kids I've been mentoring keep this fight going." At 6:38 p.m., the lethal injection began. As the drugs took effect, Young muttered about the sensation, then went silent. He was pronounced dead shortly after. Troy James Clark, September 26, 2018. Clark and Tori Bush were involved in methamphetamine use and distribution from their home in Tyler, Texas. Christina Muse had lived with them briefly, and according to Bush's testimony at Clark's trial, when Muse moved out, Clark became paranoid that she might inform the authorities about their drug activities. On Tuesday, May 19, 1998, Muse visited Clark and Bush for a social call. Clark, then 30, attacked her with a stun gun, warning her she should have kept quiet. He bound her hands and legs with duct tape, gagged her, and locked her in a bedroom closet. He left her there for hours while he played video games and sold drugs. Later, Clark moved Muse to the bathroom. He asked Bush to fetch a board, which he used to strike Muse on the head. Clark then filled the bathtub with water and forced Bush to help him hold her head under water. When she stopped breathing, Bush went to buy lime at a nearby store. Clark placed Muse's body into a 55-gallon blue barrel, added cement, water, and a lime, sealed it, and the next morning added trash and debris on top. With the help of friends, the barrel was loaded onto Clark's truck and transported to the landlord Velva Young's property outside town. Clark borrowed Young's tractor for half an hour to move the barrel, and days later arranged for a towing company to remove Muse's car from his property. After being arrested on an unrelated theft charge, Bush began cooperating with authorities, providing details that led police to discover Muse's body in the barrel, decomposed and mixed with duct tape, lime, and concrete. The pathologist confirmed the cause of death was drowning. Amber Scoggins testified that she drove Bush to buy the lime and noticed Muse's car at Clark's house before it disappeared. She later had a confrontation with Clark in which he threatened her life. Ben Barnett and Mike Coast testified they helped move the barrel and recognized Muse's car in Clark's driveway. While searching for Muse, authorities also found the body of Tracy Mize in a septic tank. Bush testified she had seen Clark with Mize in handcuffs. Police believe Clark killed Mize because he knew about Muse's murder, though he was never charged for this death. At Clark's punishment hearing, he explicitly asked to receive the death penalty, instructing his attorney not to call any mitigation witnesses. "They need to finish it and go ahead and kill me," he said. Clark also was implicated in the 1988 death of Reese Luttrell over a drug debt. Clark had prior prison time for drug possession, serving 2 short sentences in 1987 and from 1993 to 1996. In March 2000, a jury convicted him of capital murder and sentenced him to death. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals upheld the conviction in November 2002. Appeals citing inconsistencies in Bush's testimony and the lack of mitigation defense were denied. Tori Bush received a 20-year sentence for first-degree murder in exchange for her cooperation and was released on parole in June 2015. At Clark's execution, his spouse and 4 friends watched from the viewing room. He smiled and reassured them, saying, "I love y'all, it's all good." Addressing the victims' families, he added, "I'm not the one that killed Christina, so whatever makes y'all happy. I love y'all. I'll see you on the other side." As the lethal injection began, Clark remarked that the pentobarbital burned going in. He expressed sensation briefly, then grunted, gasped, and began to snore. He was pronounced dead at 6:36 p.m. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye-bye.